The ballroom went silent the moment my twin sister raised her champagne glass. 500 guests at the 1987 Harrison Fashion Gala turned to look. Magazine editors, department store buyers, reporters from Vogue and Women's Wear Daily. My father stood at the head table, beaming at his favorite daughter. I sat 3 seats away in the burgundy silk dress I had designed for myself, hand-stitched at the hem. 6 months of work. Veronica smiled like she was about to give a toast. "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight," she said. Her voice carried that warm honey tone she used when she was about to twist the knife. "And I want to make a small announcement before dessert is served." She turned to her left. Julian sat there in a tuxedo. My fiancé of 2 years. "Julian asked me to marry him last weekend," she said. And I said yes. The room gasped. Cameras flashed. A reporter laughed out loud. My mother's hand gripped mine under the table. My father lifted his glass. Julian would not look at me. I was supposed to be the bride. The wedding was in March. The invitations had already been printed. I sat there in burgundy silk and watched my twins steal my whole life. "My name is Adeline Harrison. I'm 26 years old, and I'm a fashion designer at the Harrison House of Fashion in Manhattan." Before I dive into what happened next, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Drop your city and local time in the comments. I love seeing where everyone is tuning in from. Now, back to the story. To understand how I got humiliated in front of half of New York, you have to understand my twin sister Veronica. Born 7 minutes before me. Same crib, same school, same last name, somehow a completely different universe. Our father Reginald owned 3 buildings on 7th Avenue. He built the Harrison label from one sewing machine in 1962. He was hard, sharp, and he believed only one of his daughters had the steel to inherit it. That daughter was Veronica. Our mother Eleanor was the soft heart of the family. She painted, she gardened, she remembered birthdays. She loved both of us, but she always said quietly that I was the one who truly listened. So we grew up split. 2 girls, 1 face, 2 kingdoms. My father's golden warrior, my mother's quiet artist. By age 10, Veronica already knew she would inherit everything. And by age 10, she already hated me for being loved. The favoritism was not subtle. It lived at the dinner table. Veronica came home from boarding school with B's. Father called her his rising star and bought her a horse. I came home with straight A's and a National Art Award. Father told me art was a hobby, not a career, and asked when I would grow out of it. Mother pressed her lips together and squeezed my hand under the table. When we turned 13, Father took Veronica to Paris for a buying trip. He left me at home with the housekeeper and a stack of geometry homework. He came back with 2 suitcases of dresses, all in Veronica's size. I asked him quietly if he had brought anything for me. He looked at me like he had genuinely forgotten I existed. That night I went to my room and I drew until dawn. I designed a coat with a fur collar and a satin lining in a shade of green I made up in my head. I slipped the sketch under my mother's pillow. The next morning she found it. She cried in the kitchen for a long time. She put that sketch in a frame and hung it above her vanity. It stayed there for the next 13 years. It was the only proof I had that someone in our family saw me. Veronica tried to break me before we even hit high school. When we were 15, she invited me to a party at the Astor estate. I had never been to a party. I was the girl who stayed home with sketchbooks. She told me I needed to learn how to be a Harrison. She handed me a glass of something pink and laughed when I sipped it. Vodka. Strong. I coughed and she clapped. By midnight, she had me dancing on a marble table in front of 40 drunk teenagers. Someone took a photograph with a Polaroid. She slipped that photo into Father's coat pocket the next morning. He did not yell at her. He yelled at me. He said I had embarrassed the family. He said I was reckless. He said he was disappointed. Veronica sat behind him and mouthed 2 words at me. Welcome home. That was the lesson. She did not just want my pain. She wanted to prove that I belonged in her world. The loud one, the cruel one, the one where you stepped on people, on your way to the top. I refused. I went quiet. I drew more. I read more. I worked harder, and every time I refused to become her, she hated me a little more for it. By the time we were 18, Veronica had a system. She would steal my friends, not to keep them, but to discard them. She would invite my best friend to her birthday party and then tell that friend, in front of everyone, that she had only been invited because Veronica felt sorry for her. Then she would wait for the friendship to die and smile at me across the dinner table. She did it 3 times. 3 girls I had loved like sisters. By the time I went to Parsons in 1980, I had stopped trusting anyone with the words best friend. I studied design. I lived in a tiny apartment on West 11th Street. I worked nights at a fabric warehouse to pay rent because Father refused to fund what he called my hobby. Veronica studied business at NYU. She lived in a penthouse Father bought her on Park Avenue. She drove a white convertible. She dated bankers. We saw each other at Sunday lunches. She would walk in late, kiss Father on the cheek, and ignore me until dessert. Then she would lean across the table and ask, sweet as sugar, when I was going to give up the doodling and come work for her. Mother would always change the subject. I was building something quiet. Veronica was building something loud. I joined Harrison House in 1985. I was 24. Father offered me a junior position in the design room. He said it was a favor. He said most girls with my education would not even get an interview. I took it. I needed the income. Mother needed me close. Veronica was already creative director. She did not know how to draw. She did not know how to drape. She did not know the difference between silk shantung and silk dupioni. But she had Father's last name on her business card, and that was enough. She would walk through the design room twice a day. She would pause behind my drafting table, look down at my sketches, and say something cutting just loud enough for the other designers to hear. Adeline, are we doing housewife clothes again? It's the 80s, dear, not the 50s. The other designers would laugh nervously. They had to. She controlled the budgets. But Mr. Calabrese, the head pattern maker, watched me work for 6 months without saying a word. One Friday night he stayed late. He looked at the coat I was draping and he told me, very quietly, that I had a gift my sister would never have. He told me to protect it. I did not understand what he meant. Not yet. I met Julian Ashby in the spring of 1986. He was an architect. He was renovating the new Harrison showroom on Madison Avenue. He came in one afternoon with rolled blueprints under his arm and a coffee stain on his shirt. He asked where the design director was. I told him I was the assistant designer. He looked at me, really looked at me, and said the showroom was going to be built around my collection, so my opinion mattered more than anyone else's. No one had ever said that to me. We started having lunch every Tuesday, then dinner every Thursday, then Sundays at his loft in Tribeca, where he cooked terrible pasta and played Billy Joel records. He was the first man who had ever asked me what I wanted before he told me what he wanted. 6 months in, he asked me to marry him on the Brooklyn Bridge at midnight. I said yes before he finished the question. I didn't tell Veronica for 2 weeks. When I finally did, she was sitting in the design room reading Vogue. She lowered the magazine, smiled with all her teeth, and said one sentence. How interesting. I was just thinking I needed to meet your little architect properly. I should have heard the warning in her voice. I didn't. Veronica moved on. Julian, like a hunter, moves on a deer. She invited him to lunch the next week. Just to welcome him to the family, she said. She wore a white linen dress and Father's pearls. She paid for the meal on the company card. By the 3rd week, she was inviting him to investor dinners. By the 2nd month, she was calling him at his office to ask his opinion on showroom layouts I had already approved. I told him it bothered me. He told me I was being insecure. He said Veronica was just being friendly. He said sisters were supposed to be close. I tried to believe him. Then in June, Veronica offered him a project. A massive one. She told him the Harrison family was buying a brownstone in the Hamptons. She wanted him to renovate it as her summer home. She offered him double his usual fee. She offered him a private weekend out there to see the property. She told him to bring no one. She said it was a working trip. She told me sweetly that she had given him the weekend off so he could focus. I drove out to surprise him on Saturday morning. The front door was unlocked. Her white linen dress was on the foyer floor. I stood in that foyer for what felt like an hour. I could hear them upstairs. I could hear her laughing the way she laughed when she had won something. I picked up her dress. I folded it neatly. I left it on the kitchen counter with the keys to my car. Then I called a taxi from the hallway phone and I waited on the porch. I did not cry. Not then. I rode in the cab back to the city in silence, and I went straight to my mother's apartment. I told her everything. She listened. She did not say a word for a long time. Finally, she stood up, walked to her vanity, and took down the framed sketch of the green coat. She handed it to me. "You are not going to lose yourself over this," she said. "You are going to outwork her, outlast her, and outdesign her. And one day she will be standing in a room full of people watching you win." I went home that night. I sat at my drafting table. I started a new collection. I called it Quiet Fire. The next morning at 7 a.m., Veronica walked into the office, saw me at my desk, and said, "I assume we are not making this awkward." I smiled and said no. That was the day I started planning. Father called me into his office 2 weeks later. I expected him to ask about Julian. I expected him to ask if I was all right. I expected just once in my life for him to be on my side. Instead, he told me to stop making things difficult at the office. He told me Veronica was upset that I was being cold to Julian. He told me family had to come first. I asked him if he knew what had happened in the Hamptons. He said he did. And he said Julian was a grown man and Veronica was a grown woman, and these things happened, and I needed to stop being so dramatic about it. He told me Veronica had decided to date Julian publicly. He said it would be in Page 6 on Sunday. He said he would appreciate it if I did not embarrass the family by reacting. I sat in his office in the green pencil skirt I had sewn myself, and I realized something that should have hurt me, but did not. He had never been my father. He had only ever been Veronica's. I stood up. I told him I understood. I walked out of his office, down the hall, past Veronica's open door where she was already laughing on the phone, and back to my desk. I picked up my pencil. Quiet Fire was the best thing I had ever made. 24 pieces. Wool crepe coats with hidden silk linings. Evening gowns cut on the bias with no shoulder pads in a season when shoulder pads were everything. Day dresses in colors no one had used since the 1940s. Smoky lavender, burnt rose, iron blue. I put a small signature stitch inside every single piece. 3 tight cross stitches in red thread, hidden under the inner seam at the left hip. My initials AH sewn so small you could only see them with a loop. It was my mother's idea. She told me that every painter signed their work for a reason. She told me one day I would need to prove what was mine. I called her paranoid. I did it anyway. The collection caught the eye of Macy's chief buyer in October. Her name was Camille Whitlock, and she had a reputation for being impossible to impress. She came to the showroom on a rainy Tuesday. She walked through the rack 3 times in silence. Then she turned to me and said she wanted the entire line in 175 stores by Easter. It was a $4 million order. I called my mother from the showroom phone. She cried. I should have called no one. I should have kept it quiet. Veronica heard. The Macy's order shipped in March. I supervised every piece personally. I was in the warehouse at 5 a.m. for 4 straight weeks. I checked seams. I checked dye lots. I checked button placements. Mr. Calabrese stood next to me with reading glasses and a cup of coffee. Veronica stayed away from the warehouse. That should have been a warning. The first store opened the collection on a Monday morning in Manhattan. By Monday afternoon, Camille Whitlock was on the phone screaming. The lining of every coat was wrong. Cheap polyester instead of silk. The dye on the lavender dresses had run in the dressing rooms when customers tried them on. 3 of the evening gowns had split seams under the arms. It was a disaster. It was on the cover of Women's Wear Daily on Wednesday. Father called me into his office on Thursday. Veronica sat next to him in a black suit. She had a folder in her lap. She slid it across the desk to me. It was a quality control report, signed by me, approving every piece. My signature was perfect. I had never seen the document before in my life. Father told me I was suspended without pay pending a full investigation. He told me Veronica would be taking over Quiet Fire personally. He told me to clean out my desk. I went home that night and I shook in my kitchen for an hour. She had forged my signature. I knew it. Mother knew it. Mr. Calabrese knew it. None of us could prove it. The fashion press destroyed me by Friday. A Page 6 headline read, "Harrison Heiress sinks family brand." There was a photo of me from the Hamptons Gala, looking small in burgundy silk, captioned, "The quiet sister who shouted too loud." Department stores started canceling orders. The Harrison label took its biggest hit in 20 years. Father told the press that the company had made a difficult personnel decision and that Veronica was personally salvaging the brand. He let the story run for 2 full weeks before he denied any of it. He never denied any of it. Mother stopped speaking to him at dinner. She sat at the other end of the table and ate her food in silence. He did not seem to notice. I sat in my apartment for 3 days. I did not draw. I did not sketch. I stared at the window. On the 4th morning, the buzzer rang. A man was standing on my stoop in a beautiful gray overcoat, Italian cut. He spoke with a slight accent. He said his name was Lorenzo Calderone. He said he had flown in from Milan to find me. Lorenzo's family owned the largest silk mill in northern Italy. He had supplied fabric to Harrison House for 15 years. He had personally shipped the silk for my Quiet Fire collection. He knew, down to the meter, exactly what fabric had been sent for those linings. The polyester used in the ruined coats had not come from his mill. It had come from a discount supplier in New Jersey, ordered through a side account, paid for in cash. He had brought the receipts. He sat in my tiny kitchen, drinking instant coffee, and he showed me the paperwork. The fabric switch had been ordered 6 weeks before my collection shipped, by a Harrison employee using Veronica's office line. He did not have to say her name. I asked him why he had come all the way to New York for this. He said because his mill had been blamed for the failure too. Because his family's reputation also lost money. And because, he said quietly, he had watched my collection in the showroom in October, and he believed it was the best American work he had seen in a decade. He asked me what I wanted to do. I told him I did not know yet. He smiled and said, "Then I will wait until you do." Veronica married Julian in June at the St. Regis. She invited me. Of course she did. She wanted me there. The story would not be complete without me sitting in a back pew in a beige dress watching her glide down the aisle in white French lace. Mother refused to go. She told father if he made her attend, she would file for divorce on Monday. He went alone. He walked Veronica down the aisle. He cried at the altar. I sat between 2 cousins I had not seen in years. They knew. The whole room knew. Nobody said anything. The press was outside taking photos. Veronica caught my eye during her vows. She smiled. After the ceremony, she made a speech at the reception. She thanked father for his guidance. She thanked Julian for his love. Then she turned to the room of 300 guests, and she said, "And I want to thank my sister Adeline for being so understanding, for not letting old feelings get in the way. Because that is what real family is." The room applauded politely. Julian would not look at me. I left through the kitchen door. I called Lorenzo from a payphone on 5th Avenue at midnight. I told him I was ready. He said the next plane to Milan left at 8 a.m. I flew to Milan with a single carry-on bag and 3 rolls of sketches. I stayed at the Calderone family estate in the hills outside the city for 10 weeks. Lorenzo's mother fed me ravioli and asked me almost no questions. His sister Bianca lent me a sewing machine and a corner of her atelier. The mill workers learned my name within 3 days. I drew 60 new designs, coats with hand-felted wool from Lake Como, dresses with silk that took 6 months to weave, evening pieces with embroidery from a convent in Tuscany. I stitched my signature into every piece. 3 tight cross-stitches in red thread, AH at the left hip. Lorenzo arranged for the collection to debut at a private trunk show in Milan in September. He invited every major European buyer. He paid for the venue himself. I asked him why he was risking his family's name on a disgraced American. He told me he was not risking anything. He told me he was making an investment. Then he told me one more thing that I have never forgotten. He said, "When your sister destroyed your collection, she did not destroy you. She just gave you permission to leave." I did not cry that night. I went into the studio and I worked until 4 a.m. The Milan trunk show in September 1986 was quiet. 40 buyers, no press, no champagne towers, just my 60 pieces on a long rack in a room with white walls and 1 chandelier. The buyers walked through slowly. They touched the seams. They turned the coats inside out. They looked at the linings. They looked at me. By the end of the evening, I had taken orders for every piece. Total value, $6.2 million. My label was called Atelier. 2 weeks later, Veronica walked onto the runway at Paris Fashion Week. She presented a collection she called Quiet Fire Reborn. 40 pieces. She told the press she had personally saved the line after her sister's creative breakdown. She wore a red leather coat and held Julian's hand at the after-party. The collection was beautiful. The collection was mine. Every piece. The silhouettes, the colors, the cuts. She had pulled the original sketches from the locked Harrison archives and handed them to a copy designer in Paris. The only thing missing was the red cross stitch at the left hip. She thought no one would ever notice. She thought wrong. A buyer named Margot Dupont from Galerie Lafayette sat in the front row that night. She had seen my Milan collection 3 weeks earlier. Margot Dupont did not say anything in Paris. She sat in her front row seat in a black wool dress. She watched Veronica take her bow. She applauded. She drank 1 glass of champagne at the after-party. She kissed Veronica on both cheeks. She caught a flight back to her apartment that night, and she made 1 phone call. To Lorenzo. She told him she had just watched a Milan collection presented as a Paris original. She told him she did not know which sister was lying. She told him she would not place an order from either of us until she knew. Lorenzo flew to Paris the next morning. He brought 1 piece from my Milan collection, a burnt rose evening coat. He brought it to Margot's office. He turned it inside out at her desk, in front of her 2 senior buyers, and he showed her the red cross stitch at the left hip. Then he showed her the photograph from Veronica's runway. Same cut, same fabric. No stitch. Margot picked up her phone and she made 11 calls in a row to other major European buyers. By that afternoon, the entire continent knew. The story flew home to New York by Monday. Veronica did not handle exposure well. The Paris story broke in Women's Wear Daily on Tuesday morning. Italian sister steals twins' designs, the headline read. There was a photo of my burnt rose coat from Milan and Veronica's burnt rose coat from Paris side by side. The caption asked, "Spot the difference?" By Wednesday, the story was in the New York Times. By Thursday, Veronica stopped showing up at the Harrison office. By Friday, Father had called an emergency board meeting. Mother called me in Milan that Friday night. She told me Father wanted to speak to me. She told me she had told him he could speak to me when he was ready to listen. I asked her how she was holding up. She said, very quietly, that she was packing. I asked her where she was going. She said anywhere that was not her marriage. 3 days later, Veronica began the part of the story I did not see coming. She came to my apartment in New York. I was back for 1 week to clear out the last of my things. She did not knock. She used the spare key Father had kept in his office. She was holding a kitchen knife from her own house. She was crying. She said 1 sentence, "You ruined me." I stood very still in my own kitchen. She was not going to use the knife. I knew that even then. She was holding it the way a child holds a toy they are not sure how to put down. I told her to set it on the counter. She did. She slid it slowly across the marble. She sat down on a stool, and she put her face in her hands. She told me she had hired 3 men to follow me for the past 6 months. She had paid them in cash. They had photographed me leaving Lorenzo's office. They had been the ones who broke into my old studio in March and slashed every sketchbook I had left behind. She told me she had paid a journalist at the Post $15,000 to plant the story that I was having a breakdown. She had been preparing to have me declared mentally unfit so she could buy out my share of the family company at a fraction of its worth. She had needed me erased. She told me all of this in 20 minutes, sitting at my counter, crying without makeup for the first time in her life. I did not say a word. When she was done, she stood up, picked up her car keys, and she left my apartment. That was the last time I saw her standing on 2 legs. She drove north on the West Side Highway at 90 miles an hour. It was 11 p.m. on a Friday in October. The road was wet. Witnesses said her white convertible drifted into the right lane, clipped the back of a delivery truck, and rolled 3 times into the guardrail. The fire department took 47 minutes to cut her out. She was airlifted to NYU Medical Center. I got the call at 1 a.m. from Mother. She was at the hospital. Father was on his way. The doctors were trying to save Veronica's left leg. They could not. By morning, the leg was gone from the knee down. I did not go to the hospital that day. I sat in my apartment with the television off and I drank black coffee until the sun came up. I did not cry. I did not feel triumphant. I felt nothing at all. Mother called me again at noon. She said Veronica had spoken to the police that morning, from her hospital bed. With her lawyer present, she had confessed to everything. The forged Macy's signature, the fabric switch, the hired men, the page 6 leak, the plan to have me declared unfit, the Paris Fashion Week theft, the journalist payment. She had told them all of it. Father was sitting in the hallway with his head in his hands. I went to the hospital on the 3rd day. She was in a private room on the 8th floor. Mother sat in the chair by the window. Father stood in the corner with his coat still on. Julian was nowhere to be seen. Julian had filed for divorce that morning. His lawyer had hand-delivered the papers at 9 a.m. He was not coming back. Veronica was awake. Her eyes were wet. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her. She turned her head when I walked in. She tried to speak. Her voice cracked. She said, "I am sorry." 2 words. The first apology she had ever given me in 26 years. I stood at the foot of her bed. I looked at her. I thought about every birthday, every Christmas, every Sunday lunch, every cruel sentence, the Hamptons, the signature, the men following me, the knife on my counter. I thought about Julian, about my mother packing her boxes, about my father in the corner of this room, in his expensive coat, who had loved the wrong daughter for 26 years and was only now beginning to understand what that had cost him. I did not say I forgave her. I did not say I did not. I told her I hoped she learned to live with herself. Then I left. The Harrison House of Fashion did not survive the scandal. The board pushed Father out within 6 weeks. Veronica, by then in a wheelchair and facing fraud charges, sold her shares to settle her legal fees. The company was acquired by a French conglomerate in March of 1988. The Harrison name came off the Madison Avenue building. Father moved alone into a 1-bedroom apartment in Murray Hill. Mother filed for divorce in January. She did not ask for the brownstone. She did not ask for the cars. She asked only for her own savings and her freedom. She moved into a small apartment 2 blocks from mine. She started painting again. She had not painted in 20 years. I watched her unpack her brushes one Saturday afternoon, and I cried for the first time since the night of the accident. I cried because she was finally free. I cried because it had taken our family being burned to the ground for that to happen. I cried because she should have been free decades earlier. She held me on her tiny couch and told me one thing. She said, "Some women are born free. Some women have to wait. You and I waited together, baby, and we made it out." I held her hand for an hour. Then I went home and I designed a dress in her honor. AH Atelier opened a flagship store on Madison Avenue in September of 1988. It was 3 blocks from the building where the Harrison sign used to hang. Lorenzo and I were business partners. Bianca ran the European division from Milan. Mr. Calabrese came out of retirement to run my pattern room. Camille Whitlock from Macy's, the buyer who had once watched her career almost die because of Veronica, placed the first major American order. We sold out the entire first season in 11 days. Vogue put me on the cover in November 1988. The headline read, "The Quiet One Wins." I wore a green coat with a satin lining, the same color I had drawn for Mother when I was 13. Veronica saw the cover. I know because Mother told me. Veronica sent 1 note on a single piece of cream stationery in the careful handwriting of a woman learning to use her left hand. It said, "The coat is beautiful. Mother showed me your old sketch. She was right about you." I did not write back. I did not need to. I framed the note. I hung it in my office, next to my mother's old sketch of the green coat with the fur collar, the one she had kept above her vanity for 13 years. 2 pieces of paper, 2 timelines, 1 quiet life finally won. Veronica lives in Connecticut now. She uses a prosthetic. She works from a small home office. She does freelance bookkeeping for a local accounting firm. She lives alone. Julian remarried in 1990 and moved to California. Father visits her on Sundays. I do not visit. Mother does. Mother forgave her in her own way the day Veronica could finally look her in the eye. I cannot get there, not yet, maybe not ever. And I have made peace with that. My label has 14 stores worldwide now. I employ 300 people. Lorenzo and I married in Milan in 1992. We have 1 daughter. Her name is Eleanor, after my mother. Sometimes, a young designer will come into my office for an interview. They will be nervous. They will have a portfolio under their arm. They will tell me their family does not believe in them. I always tell them the same thing. I tell them that the people who underestimate you are not the obstacle. They are the proof. I tell them to find the small detail no one is watching. The signature, the stitch, the thing that is unmistakably theirs. And I tell them to keep it hidden until the moment the world is finally ready to see it. Then I send them back out into the hallway, and I pick up my pencil. If this story struck a chord deep inside you, pour your thoughts into the comments below. And if you've ever had to rebuild your life from the ashes, or you're still quietly rebuilding it piece by piece, you're exactly where you belong. Hit subscribe, leave a like, and stay close for the next story.